$250,000. My HOA just slapped me with the most ridiculous fine in neighborhood history for violations on my own property. Are you absolutely kidding me right now? I've been living here for 30 years, minding my own business, and suddenly, these people are telling me I'm trespassing on community land. These million-dollar mansion owners with their perfect lawns and fancy cars think they can intimidate a 71-year-old man into giving up everything he owns. Big mistake. The biggest mistake of their lives. What I discovered when I decided to fight back is going to completely blow your mind and destroy their perfect little bubble forever. Trust me when you say you've never seen revenge this absolutely satisfying. Drop a comment below. Has your HOA ever tried to pull something this outrageous on you? That Tuesday morning started like any other. I was out back feeding my chickens when I heard the mail truck rumble down our quiet street. Nothing unusual, except when I checked the mailbox, there was this thick, certified letter waiting for me. The return address? Crestwood Estates, Homeowners Association, written in fancy gold lettering that probably cost more than my grocery bill. My gut screamed this wasn't good news, but I had no clue just how wild this ride was about to get. The envelope was heavy, professional, the kind that reeks of expensive lawyers from a mile away. I stood in my driveway, staring at it like it might explode, when Clara Thompson from across the street waved and called out, "Morning mail, Henry. Good news, I hope." If only she knew. Inside was a violation notice that made my blood boil faster than a summer heat wave. They were fining me $250,000 for 3 major violations: illegal fence placement beyond my property line, unauthorized structures in the community setback area, and encroachment on designated green space. Pure nonsense. My fence? Been in the same spot for 30 years, built by my dad when this place was just fields and hope. The unauthorized structures? My tool shed, chicken coop, and the gazebo my late wife, Ellen, loved to read in every evening. And the green space encroachment? That was my vegetable garden, growing tomatoes since before these mansion folks knew what dirt was. But here's where it gets juicy. Stick around, because you're gonna love this. Within 2 hours of opening that letter, Victoria Langley herself strutted across my yard like she owned it. And I mean strutted, in designer heels that probably cost more than my Social Security check, clicking across my gravel driveway with the confidence of someone who's never heard no in her life. She had 2 HOA board members trailing her like loyal puppies, and she was clutching a clipboard like it was a royal scepter. The look on her face? Pure contempt, like she'd stepped in something nasty. "Mr. Dawson," she declared, skipping. "Any pleasantries? I'm here to document these violations before we proceed with legal action." She paraded around my modest property, pointing at my fence, my shed, my coop, calling everything a violation of community standards and an encroachment on HOA land. I'm standing there, watching this show, my temper rising like a kettle about to whistle. This woman was claiming structures that predate her entire existence in this state were somehow illegal. When I showed her my 1973 property papers, proving my boundaries, she waved them off with a manicured hand. "Those old papers are irrelevant," she said like she was dismissing a child. "Modern surveys show the community boundaries. You're trespassing." That's when Clara wandered over, bless her soul, and said she remembered my fence being right there for the 25 years she's lived across the street. But Victoria just flashed a cold smile and told us we were confused about the updated property lines. She threatened legal action, property liens, and a forced sale if I didn't comply within 30 days. Most folks my age might have buckled under that kind of pressure, but I didn't spend 45 years in construction without learning how to spot a scam. Something about this stank worse than a backed-up septic tank, especially that 2010 survey. They referenced, drawn up after these mansions were built. Why redo a survey post-construction? As a retired surveyor, I knew a $250,000 fine wasn't a joke. It needed legal muscle. So I called my buddy Tom Reynolds, a property lawyer with 30 years of experience. He took one look at the violation notice and let out a low whistle. "Henry," he said, "this smells worse than a fish market at high noon. Get an independent survey done, pronto." He suggested a full boundary survey to prove my property lines were exactly where I said they were. That night, I dusted off my old surveying gear from the garage, GPS units, measuring tools, metal stakes, the works. If these folks wanted to play boundary games, they'd pick the wrong old man to mess with. I spent that evening taking preliminary measurements with my handheld GPS, and what I found made my hands shake with a mix of excitement and fury. My fence? Spot on, down to the inch, exactly where the original property corners should be. Using my metal detector, I started, finding the original survey stakes buried under the fancy landscaping around those mansions. But here's the kicker. Those stakes suggested my property extended way beyond my current fence line. Way, way beyond. If I was right, some very expensive structures might be sitting on land that was legally mine. I looked at Victoria's mansion with its infinity pool and tennis court, then at the 4 other palatial homes surrounding my little house, and started wondering who was really trespassing here. The next morning, I called Sam Carter, the best independent surveyor in 3 counties, and laid out the situation. When I mentioned the buried stakes and that shady 2010 survey, he went quiet for a long minute. "Henry," he finally said, "this sounds like the kind of mess that makes lawyers rich and homeowners poor. If you're right, we're talking about something bigger than a fence dispute." He agreed to do a comprehensive 3-week survey of my 8 acres, using top-tier tech, GPS base stations, laser equipment, ground-penetrating radar, the whole deal. If someone was trying to steal my land with fake paperwork, we'd prove it with tech that doesn't lie. Week 1 was like watching an artist at work. Sam set up his equipment with surgical precision, using my 1973 ownership papers as the baseline. We started with the property corners, cross-referencing legal descriptions with GPS satellite data accurate to inches. Every day brought new evidence that made my suspicions feel less like paranoia and more like cold, hard fact. The GPS showed my property extended 50 to 75 feet beyond my fence in multiple directions, meaning I'd been living on just a fraction of my land. More importantly, it meant those mansions might be sitting on my property. By week 2, Sam's metal detector was uncovering original iron stakes buried 2 to 3 feet under the mansion's landscaping, hidden to erase the real boundaries. I caught Victoria pacing in her backyard, making frantic phone calls and glaring at us like we were stealing her crown jewels. One afternoon, she marched over, trying to question Sam's credentials with her fake sweet voice. Sam just grinned, handed her his card with the state surveyor seal, and pointed out his 20 years of experience. Her face went pale when she realized she wasn't dealing with an amateur. The revelations hit like a freight train loaded with karma. Victoria's $300,000 infinity pool and tennis court? Entirely on my land. Mark Reynolds, 4-car. Garage with that fancy circular driveway? My property. Lisa Bennett's $500,000 master bedroom wing with a bathroom bigger than my kitchen? Mine. John Harper's outdoor kitchen for his swanky dinner parties? My land. And Sarah Mitchell's. Manicured front lawn with its fountain and gazebo? You guessed it. Mine. Sam kept shaking his head as we documented each encroachment with GPS precision and pro-grade photos. "Henry," he said, measuring Victoria's pool area, "in 20 years, I've never seen trespassing this blatant across multiple properties. This wasn't an accident. Someone knew exactly what they were doing." The scope was staggering. Over $2 million in structures, landscaping, and improvements built on my 8 acres without my consent. Every mansion had pricey additions crossing my property lines, some by huge margins. The smoking gun, that 2010 survey the HOA cited. Sam tracked down the company that supposedly filed it, out of business since 2008, 2 years before the survey, was allegedly done. The signatures didn't match any licensed surveyors in the state database. The coordinates, pure fiction, designed to shrink my property. Someone had faked an entire survey to steal my land, and they'd been getting away with it for over a decade. Clara turned out to be a gold mine of info. She remembered the construction phase vividly. Crews moving my original fence markers, telling neighbors they were updating boundaries for the new development. She'd assumed it was legit because, well, who questions official looking? Crews with permits. But now, seeing Sam's measurements and recalling where things used to be, it clicked. My dad's boundary markers had been deliberately moved to hide the fact that these rich folks were building on my land. The final week of surveying felt like unwrapping presents on Christmas morning, except the gifts were evidence that would flip 5 families' lives upside down. Sam compiled a 40-page report with legal descriptions, GPS coordinates, photos, and satellite confirmations. The conclusion was airtight. I owned portions of all 5 mansions, based on deeds predating their construction by decades. GPS. Tech just confirmed what my dad knew when he bought this land. Property lines don't move because rich folks want them to. Victoria's panic was palpable. She hired her own attorney, threatened to sue Sam's company, demanded second opinions, and started muttering about confused old men with vindictive motives. But Sam's equipment doesn't have grudges. It measures truth, and the truth was about to cost 5 wealthy neighbors dearly. With Sam's report in hand, I felt like I was holding a loaded shotgun. The GPS data, legal descriptions, and photos were undeniable, but being right and proving it in court are 2 different beasts. I needed a lawyer who ate property disputes for breakfast. Tom recommended his colleague, Rachel Parker, a sharp-tongued attorney who'd spent 20 years making developers regret their life choices. Rachel took one look at Sam's report and whistled. "Henry," she said, "this is either the biggest property case I've seen or the slickest fraud in state history. Based on these deeds and GPS data, I'd bet my license you own what you say you do." She explained that recorded deeds are like the Bible in real estate. HOA bylaws, neighborhood agreements, none of it trumps a properly filed 1973 deed. My paperwork was legal gold, ignored while millionaires built pools on my land. Rachel's research uncovered more dirt. The mansion permits were approved using falsified boundary info that didn't match county records. Someone in the development company had submitted fake surveys to build beyond the actual lot lines. The county confirmed my deed was legit, never modified or challenged. That 2010 survey, a total sham, filed by a shell company tied to the original developer. While I built my case, Victoria went full warpath. She filed noise complaints about my rooster crowing at dawn. Apparently, 6 a.m. was too early for her delicate ears. She reported my coop as an agricultural violation and called the health department about my compost pile, claiming it was unsanitary. Every day brought a new certified letter, a new threat, a new attempt to break me. But she didn't know old construction guys like me were tougher than nails and twice as stubborn. Her harassment just fueled my fire. Clara became my unofficial spy, tracking which board members were at Victoria's emergency meetings and overhearing frantic phone calls through her walls. The desperation was obvious. They'd built their dream homes on stolen land and were facing a nightmare. The neighborhood started noticing our 3-week survey project. Clara spread the word about Sam's findings, and reactions split predictably. Longtime residents nodded, recalling those shady boundary shifts during construction. Newer folks, cozy with the HOA, treated me like a senile old man making trouble. Sam's research into the development company revealed a pattern that gave me chills. They'd pulled similar stunts in 3 other developments: fake surveys, moved markers, and HOA agreements to legitimize land grabs. They targeted elderly owners less likely to fight, buying them out cheap after years of harassment. I wasn't their first victim, just the first who happened to be a surveyor with 45 years of experience. Victoria's desperation peaked when she showed up at my door with a $50,000 cashier's check, calling it a generous offer to settle this misunderstanding. Standing there with her fake smile, she said, "Henry, surely we can resolve this like civilized adults?" I looked at the check, then at her, and said, "Lady, I don't take money from folks who've been stealing my land for 15 years. If anyone's paying, it's you for using my property." That moment set the stage for the final showdown. Victoria called an emergency HOA meeting to paint me as the villain, hoping to rally the community against me. But I was ready. Sam prepared a visual presentation to make the boundaries crystal clear. Maps, photos, GPS demos, and legal docs told a story no money could rewrite. The meeting was set for Tuesday at the community center, and I spent the weekend reviewing every shred of evidence, knowing this was my shot to expose the truth. As I sat in my kitchen Sunday night, staring at survey maps on the table where Ellen used to serve dinner, I thought about what my dad would say. He taught me property ownership was a sacred right, worth any fight. Tuesday's meeting would decide if 15 years of theft would continue, or if an old surveyor with a GPS could prove justice still matters. Tuesday evening hit like a lightning bolt. My hands shook, not from fear, but anticipation, as I loaded my presentation, gear into the truck. The community center parking lot was packed, cars stretching further than any HOA meeting in 15 years. Word of the dispute had spread, and folks wanted to see me crash and burn. Victoria had turned the center into a courtroom, complete with a head table for the 5 board members, a mic system, and a projector screen she planned to use to showcase my violations. She wore a $1,000 suit, flanked by 2 lawyers with briefcases pricier than my monthly budget. The other board members, Mark, Lisa, John, and Sarah, sat like judges at a trial, their faces screaming they expected to watch me fold. Victoria's presentation was a masterclass in manipulation. Enlarged photos of my violations, legal jargon about property standards, and her lawyer's spiel about the serious consequences of challenging the HOA. She painted me as a confused old man disrupting neighborhood harmony. The audience nodded, convinced I'd lost it. Each board member piled on. Mark griped about my rooster waking him up. Lisa whined about my garden attracting critters. John called my shed an eyesore, and Sarah fretted about my coop's safety issues. Their lawyer wrapped up, making it sound like I was one step from jail. When Victoria called me to respond, the room went silent as a graveyard. I walked to the front, set up Sam's laptop, plugged in the projector, and unpacked my GPS unit like I was about to perform. "Heart surgery? Folks," I said, looking at 25 faces expecting me to beg, "I've been a surveyor for 45 years. Tonight, you'll see the difference between accusations and measurements." The first slide was a drone shot of the neighborhood. Red lines showing GPS-verified boundaries slicing through pools, garages, and lawns. The audience gasped like a balloon deflating. Next slide, Victoria's pool and tennis court, GPS coordinates proving they're on my land. "Mrs. Langley," I said, letting the silence hit hard, "your $300,000 pool? That's my backyard." Her face went from smug to pale in seconds. Sam's credentials flashed next: state licensed, 20 years of experience, GPS certified. Then came the bombshells: Mark's garage, Lisa's bedroom wing, John's kitchen, Sarah's lawn, all on my property backed by GPS data, photos, and legal descriptions. The fake 2010 survey sealed it. Forged signatures, a defunct company, fake coordinates. "Someone," I said, eyeing the board, "created a false survey to steal my land, and they've gotten away with it for 15 years. Clara stood up, confirming she saw crews move markers during construction, and other longtime residents chimed in, piecing together the deception. The room's mood flipped from skepticism to shock to anger as folks realized they'd lived, next to a massive land theft. Victoria's attempts to counter fell apart. Her lawyers claimed that GPS was unreliable, crumbled when I demoed live coordinates matching the original stakes. Her accusations of me being a vindictive old man were met with my calm reply. GPS doesn't have opinions, and math doesn't lie. The meeting dissolved into chaos. Board members on phones with lawyers, residents arguing, Victoria shouting to stop believing my ridiculous claims. I packed up my gear, calm as a summer breeze, knowing the truth was out. No amount of money could bottle it back up. The next morning, my phone rang before my rooster crowed. Rachel called. Victoria had hired the state's priciest litigation firm. "Henry," she said, "this is war. Months, maybe years. You ready?" Thinking of Ellen, who always said some fights are worth the cost, I told Rachel to file whatever we needed. Rachel filed a boundary dispute with the county court, seeking a judgment based on my deeds and surveys. Within 48 hours, Victoria's team countersued for fraud, harassment, elder abuse, and emotional distress, throwing every legal trick to scare me off. The filing fees hit harder than anything since Ellen's funeral, but principle outweighs comfort. The discovery phase was like a root canal done by lawyers. We traded documents, depositions, and 50 years of records. Victoria's team grilled me on my mental state and motives, but they couldn't dodge the GPS data or my deed. By month 2, the media jumped in, loving the David versus Goliath angle. Property rights groups offered support, other homeowners shared HOA horror stories, and attorneys from 3 states called about similar cases. I didn't ask to be a poster child, but life doesn't always ask permission. The expert witness battles were a clash of old-school know-how and legal spin. Victoria's surveyor claimed GPS wasn't precise enough, but Sam brought in tech experts to prove its inch-level accuracy, matching the buried stakes. When science meets hot air, science wins. Month 4 brought settlement talks that felt like hostage negotiations. Victoria's offers climbed $50,000, $100,000, then $200 to sign away my claims. Each came with threats about litigation costs. I rejected everyone. I don't sell my land to thieves. My legal bills hit $75,000, eating into my grandkids' inheritance, but every glance at those mansions on my land steeled my resolve. This wasn't about money. It was about whether property rights mean anything when rich folks want your land. Month 6 saw pre-trial motions over evidence, surveyor standards, and GPS's legal weight. The local Surveyor Association backed me, arguing GPS is the gold standard. Advocacy groups warned that ignoring deeds would gut property law. Victoria's $2 million offer for my 8 acres, 4 times its value, came with a plea to avoid trial. I told her lawyer, "My property lines don't move because you built houses on them." Month 8 felt like prepping for a championship fight. We finalized witness lists, exhibits, and jury selection for what was now the state's most watched property case. The courthouse braced for crowds and media. Sam prepared a killer testimony on GPS standards, and Rachel built a presentation tracing 50 years of ownership. The night before trial, staring at my survey maps, I felt the weight of challenging wealthy folks with endless resources. But we had truth, backed by satellites and deeds. The trial morning, the courthouse was a circus. Media vans, advocates rallying, onlookers packing the gallery. Judge Ellen Carter, a 20-year property law veteran, opened with a nod. To the case's importance, this will set precedents for GPS and boundary disputes and the weight of recorded deeds. Victoria's lawyers argued my survey was flawed, GPS was unreliable, and practical considerations should outweigh measurements when homes were at stake. Their expert claimed GPS could drift, but Sam's live demo and explanation of satellite precision shut that down. The fake 2010 survey was the knockout punch. Sam showed it was mathematically impossible, with dead surveyors' signatures and a defunct company. "This isn't just wrong, he testified. It's deliberate fraud to shrink Mr. Dawson's property. Clara's testimony sealed it. She recalled crews moving markers and confirmed my fence's location for 25 years. Her honesty carried more weight than any expert. Victoria's testimony was a train wreck. She couldn't explain her boundary claims, the 2010 survey's source, or why the HOA never contacted me before the fine. When Rachel asked if she knew the survey was fake, her stammering non-answer screamed guilt. My testimony leaned on 45 years of experience, explaining GPS's revolution in surveying and showing its reliability. When accused of being vindictive, I told the jury, "I'm just defending my dad's land with the best tech available." The jury deliberated 2 days. Nerve-wracking, but Rachel said property cases take time. When Judge Carter read the verdict, her voice rang like a gavel. GPS coordinates, properly obtained, are irrefutable. Mr. Dawson's ownership is confirmed beyond reasonable doubt. The courtroom erupted. Supporters cheered. Victoria's team scrambled for appeals. The damage phase set rental values for 15 years of unauthorized use. Victoria faced paying rent for her pool or demolishing it. The others got similar choices: pay or tear down. Judge Carter's ruling made GPS the legal standard for boundaries and affirmed deeds over HOA claims. Walking out, I was mobbed by supporters and media. Clara hugged me, and advocates hailed the win as a victory for property rights nationwide. The satisfaction of proving an old surveyor could beat wealth and manipulation was worth every second of the 8-month fight. 1 year later, I wake to my rooster crowing over my GPS-verified 8 acres. Rental checks arrive monthly: $2,000 from Victoria for her pool, $1,500 from Mark for his garage, $2,500 from Lisa for her bedroom, and $1,800 from John for his kitchen. Sarah paid to relocate her fountain but leases her lawn for $1,200. I'm not about revenge, just justice and fair pay. Clara's my unofficial manager, keeping things smooth. When Victoria's pool pump broke, Clara brokered a cost-sharing deal that kept the peace. Her garden's now a community space with neighbors renting plots. The media still calls for updates, and law schools teach Dawson versus Crestwood as a landmark case. Sam's business is booming, and I speak at surveyor conventions, helping other homeowners fight similar battles. The pattern's ugly. Developers and HOAs target the elderly, but GPS and courage can win. My winnings funded a new truck, home upgrades, and a scholarship for surveying students. But the real reward? Respect from a community that once saw me as a troublemaker. Victoria's learned humility, asking my advice on a fence issue last month, treating my expertise with respect she never showed before. People change when consequences hit. Annual GPS surveys are now neighborhood events, with residents hiring Sam to avoid future disputes. My tenants maintain their structures well, knowing it protects their investments. I've learned more about pool maintenance than I ever wanted, but it's satisfying watching my land respected. Teaching GPS and property rights at the community. College has shown me young folks see surveying as exciting, not outdated. Property rights are the bedrock of freedom, and surveying guards them. My morning coffee now comes with views of structures my tenants built on my land, and evening walks trace boundaries satellites confirmed. The land my dad bought and Ellen loved is secure for my heirs, backed by legal precedents that'll protect others. From a $250,000 fine to monthly rent from millionaires, this fight proved knowing your rights and standing firm can beat bullies, no matter how rich they are. My GPS and experience were weapons against wealth and lies. But the real lesson? Age doesn't weaken you. It gives you wisdom the young haven't earned. Sophia and her board learned property lines don't move because you want them to. And sometimes, the quiet old guy next door knows exactly what he's doing. Here at HOA Stories, we believe every David deserves to beat their Goliath. Henry Dawson proved age, experience, and honesty can triumph over wealth, intimidation, and lies. His story reminds us that fighting for what's right isn't easy, but it's worth it. Whether it's corrupt HOAs, shady neighbors, or anyone trying to steal what's yours, follow Henry's playbook, document everything, know your rights, and don't let bullies scare you. If this tale of sweet revenge and perfect justice got your blood pumping, smash that like button and share your thoughts below. Have you fought for what's yours? Faced a property scam? Drop your David vs. Goliath stories. We love hearing how ordinary folks beat the odds. Thanks for joining us at HOA Files, and we'll catch you in the next story where another underdog gets the last laugh. Until then, know your boundaries, trust your instincts, and never let anyone tell you being right isn't worth fighting for.